22. For more than a decade, that was the number you heard. 22 American veterans dying by suicide every single day. It came from a Department of Veterans Affairs report based on data from around 2010 to 2012, and it became one of the most repeated statistics in modern mental health advocacy. But here's what's true today. According to the most recent VA National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report, the number is closer to 17 or 18 veterans per day. In 2023, the most recent year of complete data, there were 6,398 veteran suicides. That's progress, real progress, the result of years of work by clinicians, by veteran service organizations, and by the VA itself. But 17 a day is still 17 too many. And among younger veterans, suicide remains one of the leading causes of death. A significant portion of those deaths trace back to one diagnosis: post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition we have been treating with the same two SSRIs, sertraline and paroxetine, since the Clinton administration. Drugs that work, partially, for maybe a third of patients. There is another drug, one with phase 3 trial data showing that 67% of people with severe treatment-resistant PTSD no longer met the diagnostic criteria after just 3 sessions, an effect size more than double anything else in the literature. That drug is MDMA, and in August of 2024, the FDA said no. This is the story of why, and why that answer might be about to change. To understand the rejection, you have to understand the medicine. MDMA is short for 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine. It's a synthetic compound, first patented by the pharmaceutical company Merck. In 1912, over a century ago, for most of that century, almost nobody used it. It re-emerged in the 1970s among a small group of psychotherapists who noticed something unusual. Patients on MDMA could talk about traumatic memories without being overwhelmed by them. Here's the mechanism. MDMA causes a massive release of serotonin, along with dopamine and norepinephrine. It also raises oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone, and it lowers activity in the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. Translated into plain English, it turns down fear, not by numbing the patient, by temporarily making the memory feel safe enough to examine. For someone with PTSD, whose brain has filed a traumatic event as a permanent, ongoing threat, that window matters. It's the difference between reliving the trauma and reprocessing it. This is the foundation of what's now called MDMA-assisted therapy. 2 or 3 full-day sessions with a trained therapist spaced weeks apart, with extensive integration work in between. It is not a daily pill. It is not a recreational drug in a clinical wrapper. It is a medicine designed to make one specific kind of conversation possible. The organization that pushed MDMA back into clinical research is called MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. Founded in 1986. They spent 30 years getting the FDA to even agree to phase 1 trials. Then came the phase 3 results. The first trial was called MAPP1, published in Nature Medicine in 2021. 90 participants with severe treatment-resistant PTSD, meaning standard medications had already failed them. Average duration of illness, over 14 years. The kind of patients most psychiatrists describe as the hardest cases in their practice. After 3 MDMA-assisted therapy sessions, 67% of the MDMA group no longer met the diagnostic criteria for PTSD. In the placebo with therapy group, it was 32%. The effect size was 0.91. To put that in context, the effect size for sertraline, the most prescribed PTSD medication in America, is around 0.2. MDMA-assisted therapy was producing results roughly 4.5 times stronger than the standard of care. A second phase 3 trial, MAPP2 replicated the result. Same direction, same magnitude. By early 2024, MAPS had spun out a commercial subsidiary called Lykos Therapeutics and filed a new drug application with the FDA. Priority review granted. A target action date of August 11, 2024. The psychedelic field had been waiting for this moment for 40 years. On August 9, 2024, 2 days before the decision deadline, the FDA issued what's called a complete response letter. A complete response letter is not technically a rejection. In regulatory language, it means the application cannot be approved in its current form. In practical language, for Lykos, it was a no. The agency cited 3 specific problems. First, the trial design could not adequately blind participants. MDMA produces a subjective experience that is very difficult to mistake for placebo. If a patient knows they got the real drug, their expectations alone can drive symptom improvement. The FDA argued this expectancy effect could not be ruled out, and that the trials had not been designed to rigorously control for it. Second, durability. The agency wrote, quote, "The data contained in your application fails to establish how MDMA should be used to treat this chronic disease." Translation: they wanted to see longer-term follow-up. How long does the benefit last? When do symptoms return? Is a 4th session needed? A 5th? Third, selection bias. A high percentage of trial participants had used MDMA before. The screening process rejected many candidates. Together, the FDA argued, this raised the possibility that the trial population was not representative of the patients who would actually receive the drug, if approved. There was a 4th issue, less prominent in the official letter, but central in the months leading up to the decision. An FDA advisory committee had voted in June 2024, 9-2 against efficacy, 2-10 on whether benefits outweighed risks. The committee had also heard testimony from former trial participants alleging ethical violations at certain trial sites. The FDA recommended Lykos conduct an entirely new Phase 3 trial. For a company that had spent the better part of a decade preparing for approval, this was a financial earthquake. Layoffs followed within weeks. By 2025, Lykos had restructured and renamed itself Resilient Pharmaceuticals. Resilient did not give up. In late 2025, the company filed a resubmission. This time, the application included expectancy-controlled analyses, new statistical models designed to estimate how much of the observed benefit could be attributed to patient expectations alone, separated from the drug's pharmacological effect. It also included extended long-term follow-up data, addressing the durability concern, and an independent third-party data audit, which the FDA's original complete response letter had explicitly recommended. That resubmission was working its way through a standard review cycle when the April 2026 executive order landed. For a moment, observers in the field assumed MDMA would be one of the first beneficiaries. The press coverage of the executive order frequently mentioned MDMA by name. The Department of Veterans Affairs had already been running MDMA-assisted therapy trials at multiple sites. The political logic seemed obvious: accelerated treatment for PTSD with veterans as the centerpiece. But when the FDA announced its first 3 priority review vouchers, 6 days after the executive order, MDMA was not on the list. The vouchers went to psilocybin from Compass Pathways, psilocybin from the USONA Institute, and, to almost universal surprise, methylone from Transcend Therapeutics for PTSD. Methylone is a chemical cousin of MDMA. The 2 compounds share a similar mechanism, but methylone has never run a completed Phase 3 trial in PTSD. It is years behind Resilient's data package. The agency's reasoning has not been made fully public. The current consensus among regulatory analysts is that the FDA wanted to avoid restarting the political controversy of the Lykos review. Methylone gave the administration a way to advance a treatment for veterans with PTSD without relitigating the August 2024 decision. So where does this leave the patient? The veteran with treatment-resistant PTSD, the survivor of sexual assault, the first responder whose nightmares haven't stopped in 15 years. The honest answer for 2026 is this: there is no legal path to MDMA-assisted therapy in the United States outside of a clinical trial. MDMA remains a Schedule I controlled substance. The Drug Enforcement Administration has not moved to reschedule it. The April executive order did not change its legal status. What is available right now is trial enrollment. Resilient Pharmaceuticals continues to operate Phase 3B sites in California, Colorado, New York, and Oregon. The Department of Veterans Affairs is running MDMA-assisted PTSD trials at multiple VA medical centers, with the executive order explicitly directing HHS and the FDA to coordinate expanded VA access. For a post-9/11 veteran with a PTSD diagnosis, VA trial enrollment is currently the fastest legitimate path. For non-veterans, the search tool is clinicaltrials.gov. Search for MDMA PTSD. Filter for trials currently recruiting. What is the realistic timeline for broader access? If the resilient resubmission survives the re-review, first FDA approval could land in late 2026. That would be a significant compression from the previous baseline of mid-2027 at the earliest. But approval is not access. Even after approval, MDMA-assisted therapy will be delivered through what's called a REMS program, a risk evaluation and mitigation strategy. Treatment will only be available at certified clinics with trained therapists under specific protocols. It will not be a prescription you pick up at a pharmacy. The most optimistic, realistic timeline for first patients outside of trials is late 2026 or early 2027. The actual timeline depends on the FDA, on the DEA, and on whether insurance carriers agree to cover what is likely to be a multi-thousand-dollar course of treatment. Step back from the regulatory detail for a moment and consider what this story actually is. A medicine with Phase 3 trial data 4.5 times stronger than the current standard of care has been waiting at the FDA's door for 2 years. The agency has identified specific, technical, addressable concerns. The sponsor has addressed them. The political environment has shifted in favor of acceleration, and the answer is still not yet. The skeptical reader will note that the FDA's caution may be warranted. Trial blinding in psychedelic studies is a genuinely hard scientific problem. Expectancy effects in highly subjective treatments are not trivial. The advisory committee's 9-2 vote was not an outlier. It reflected real disagreement among working scientists about the strength of the evidence. The optimistic reader will note that no PTSD medication in history has cleared a higher bar than the one MDMA is being asked to clear, and that during the years of regulatory deliberation, 17 veterans have continued to die every day. Both readings can be true at the same time. That is the actual texture of evidence-based medicine. It moves carefully because the cost of approving a bad drug is high. It also moves carefully because the cost of delaying a good drug is high. The FDA exists at the intersection of those two failures. What changed in April 2026 was not the science. The science has been roughly the same since 2021. What changed was the political tolerance for the second kind of failure, the failure to approve when approval was warranted. Whether MDMA-assisted therapy is genuinely a breakthrough or a near miss is a question only the next round of data will answer. What is no longer in question is that the system is now willing to ask.
There is a quiet arithmetic in regulation. Every day a treatment waits is the day someone else does not. The FDA was built to weigh that math carefully. The harder question is whether anyone is keeping the books on both sides. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep learning.